Well, Clayton, this is a pretty interesting subject. Personally, I've seen a lot of marketing for products made in the USA or assembled in the USA, and personally, I don't really pay attention to which is which.
Yeah, Eileen, but clearly it's not as simple as it seems. Made in America and assembled in America are two very different things, and frankly, I think a lot of this marketing is very misleading to American consumers.
I have to disagree there, Clayton. These companies are still helping the American workers by providing jobs, even if some of the manufacturing takes place outside of the USA.
Well, clearly this is an important debate, but I think our viewers would like to get a better sense of what it really means to be made versus assembled in America.
Yes, and to talk more about that, let's bring on our first special guest, Julie Brills from the Federal Trade Commission. Hello, Julie.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Julie, you're a commissioner for the Federal Trade Commission, or FTC. Could you tell us a little bit about what the FTC does?
The FTC is a government agency that helps to prevent deception and unfairness in the marketplace. Essentially, we protect American consumers.
And part of that, I believe, is regulating the advertisements or claims that companies can make about their products.
Yes, that is correct.
So what does it take for a company to be able to label their product made in America?
The FTC requires that a product advertised as made in USA be all or virtually all made in the United States, so all significant parts and processing that go into the product must be of US origin. We consider things like how much of the product's total manufacturing cost can be attributed to the US parts and processing, and how far removed any foreign content is from the finished product.
And how does that compare to assembled in the USA?
A product labeled assembled in USA can be made up of foreign components if its principal assembly takes place in the US. For the assembly claim to be valid, the product's last substantial transformation has to be in the US. We get a lot of businesses putting foreign components together in a very cursory, what we call a screwdriver assembly in America at the end of the manufacturing process. That doesn't usually qualify for the assembled in US claim.
Now, this still seems a bit deceptive to American consumers because honestly I don't think most people even consider whether a product is made versus assembled in the USA. You know, they just think American goods, American jobs, but clearly there's a big difference between these two labels.
Yeah, there is. And the reality is, for certain products, especially consumer electronics and other high-tech products, it's very hard to make the entire thing in the United States. The parts are much more expensive to manufacture here, and companies simply can't be competitive. American-made products are seen as higher quality. In fact, even Chinese consumers will pay more for products made in the United States. And creating domestic manufacturing jobs generates support from communities and often from politicians. Assembled in USA campaigns are one way companies are trying to take advantage of these benefits.
Well, that's all the time we have, but Julie, thank you so much for being on the show today.
You're very welcome.
All right, and Julie mentioned consumer electronics, which ties into our next guest for today. This is Susan Wojcicki, Senior Vice President of Ads and Commerce at Google. Now, Susan, Google recently released a new line of phones called the Moto X with a major marketing campaign about how they're all assembled in the USA. You just saw Julie Brill speaking about what this means. Now, do you think this claim is deceptive to consumers?
I don't think the claim is deceptive. The Moto X is absolutely assembled in the United States. While it's not 100% made in America, it's still very impressive and progressive that every Moto X sold in the US was assembled in Fort Worth, Texas. It's the first smartphone ever to be assembled domestically, and it's providing around 2,000 jobs to Americans. Google Glass is assembled domestically as well in California, and Google is really a leader in bringing the production of high-tech products back to the United States.
Yeah, but I think you're avoiding the main issue, which is that clearly most consumers don't really understand what assembled in America means. The final assembly is only a very small part of the production of the smartphone, and I think this is more of a marketing strategy than a real commitment to creating American jobs.
Google's marketing is accurate and complies with FTC regulations. Assembly is an important part of the production of a smartphone. Setting up assembly in the US allows us to quickly ship made-to-order hardware to customers, making it possible for them to personalize their Moto X phones with different colors and materials, and then receive them in just a week.
Yeah, and obviously that's an important selling point for the product, but it's something that you're advertising separately. Advertising the product as assembled in America, while it may be true, is still, I think, really deceptive to your consumers.
Well, I think we have to move on to our third guest, but Susan, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Now, Clayton, I think I'm beginning to see where you're coming from, although I think this next guest will really give us some understanding into how much of the work of the product really goes on American soil. So this is Samantha Chen, a representative of the National Technology Workers Union, or NTWU. The NTWU recently completed an investigation into the supply chain for the Moto X. Samantha, could you tell us a little more about what this investigation uncovered?
Sure, Eileen.
See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Even though a trivial amount of the work that actually goes into the phone occurs on US soil, they can slap a Made in America label on it and then advertise all over the place.
Well, it's not entirely misleading. 2,000 jobs is still an accomplishment when compared to 0 jobs. However, when you compare 2,000 jobs to the 1.3 million workers in Chinese factories, 2,000 is very little, and the Chinese factory workers are the ones who do most of the work on the phones.
So why even bother with assembly in the USA? It all seems so meaningless and arbitrary.
In this case, assembly in the USA means that the phones can be customized and shipped out more easily. So it's the parts that you see, like a plastic case or wooden case, those are the things that are customized in the US. However, the things on the inside and the display and the parts that make the phone actually work, those are going to be from outside the US. That's mainly because the US doesn't have the factories that are capable of making some of these components.
So unless some of these factories are built, we can basically assume that it's not really being made in the US, or at least not for the most part.
Exactly. The Moto X is maybe 15% American made, maybe even less. And while it's still more than most electronics, it's not as patriotic as it looks on the surface.
Alright, well, it looks like we're almost out of time.
Thanks for sharing your time
Thank
with
you.
us. And please join us next week when we explore a new question. What's really in your pet's food?
This has been Round Table.